On November 14, 1854, a storm destroyed a fleet. 38 ships. Gone. The Black Sea. In one night. Nobody predicted it. Nobody warned anyone. Nobody had a system to do so. The French government demanded answers. An astronomer named Leverrier was handed the problem. He wrote to every observatory in Europe, collected weather reports, mapped them, and realized the storm had been trackable for days. The storm didn't appear from nowhere. It traveled. And no one was watching for most of human history. Weather prediction was religious. Rain meant God was angry. Drought meant God was angrier. The solution in both cases was identical. Pray harder. The Babylonians were the first to attempt systematic weather observation. Around 650 BC, they recorded cloud patterns on clay tablets. Their forecast accuracy rate was roughly equivalent to random chance. Aristotle wrote Meteorologica in 340 BC. It was considered the definitive authority on weather for nearly 2,000 years. Most of it was wrong. Confidently. Authoritatively. And completely wrong. Medieval scholars copied his errors faithfully for centuries. Questioning Aristotle was not merely academically discouraged. In certain periods, it was theologically dangerous. The weather remained unexplained and deadly. Unexpected storms regularly destroyed harvests, fleets, and entire armies. The Great Storm of 1703 killed approximately 10,000 people in Britain alone. The official government response was a national day of fasting. Weather forecasting remained untouched. Folk methods filled the vacuum. Farmers predicted weather by watching animal behavior, aching joints, and the color of the sunset. Some consulted onion skins. This was considered practical science. It was practiced by educated men. These signs were published in official almanacs, distributed to governments, consulted by naval commanders before setting sail. The instruments of modern meteorology did not exist. The desire to know the future did. So humans improvised catastrophically. The first real instrument arrived in 1643. Evangelista Torricelli invented the barometer. He discovered that air had weight, that atmospheric pressure changed, and that these changes correlated with approaching weather. This was genuinely revolutionary. Nobody immediately knew what to do with it. For decades, barometers were decorative objects, conversation pieces for wealthy drawing rooms. Scientists understood pressure. They did not yet understand how to build a system from individual observations. Each barometer existed in isolation, measuring nothing useful. Gabriel Fahrenheit standardized the thermometer in 1714. Temperature could now be measured consistently across locations. This was the second instrument. Still nobody connected them into a system. Weather observation remained a hobby, not a science. The fundamental problem was communication. A barometer in Paris meant nothing to a sailor in Portsmouth. Weather moved faster than any messenger could ride. Data existed in isolated pockets across the continent. Useless. Disconnected. Arriving too late. The telegraph changed everything. Invented in the 1830s. For the first time in human history. Information traveled faster than weather. A storm approaching from the west could now be reported ahead of its arrival. The tool existed. Someone had to build the system. Leverrier stared at the Black Sea disaster reports. He contacted observatories across Europe. The data came back. The storm had been visible, moving, trackable. For 2 full days before it struck, Leverrier's conclusion was simple and devastating. If observers across Europe had shared data simultaneously, the fleet could have been warned. 38 ships did not have to sink. The deaths were not inevitable. They were administrative. Napoleon III responded immediately. In 1855, he ordered the creation of France's first national meteorological service. Leverrier was placed in charge. He had 13 weather stations. No budget. No staff. And no established methodology whatsoever. Leverrier built a telegraph network connecting observatories across France. Every morning, each station reported temperature, pressure, and wind direction. The data arrived in Paris by 10 o'clock. Leverrier then drew it by hand onto a single map. This was the world's first weather forecast. It was crude, incomplete, based on 13 data points for an entire country. But it worked. Leverrier issued the first public storm warning in history on February 19, 1856. He was wrong about the timing. He was right about the storm. Nobody cared about the timing. Across the channel, Robert FitzRoy was doing the same thing independently. FitzRoy was the captain who had sailed Charles Darwin around the world. After retiring from the Navy, he became Britain's first meteorological statesman. He was also, by most accounts, profoundly difficult to work with. FitzRoy invented the term weather forecast in 1861. He began publishing daily predictions in the Times of London. Fishermen read them. Ship captains followed them. Lives were saved. The scientific establishment responded with immediate and sustained contempt. Prominent scientists argued that weather could not be predicted, that FitzRoy's forecasts were unscientific guesswork dressed in official clothing. The Royal Society formally criticized his methods. Newspapers mocked him when forecasts failed. Nobody credited him when they were correct. FitzRoy suffered under the pressure of public ridicule and institutional hostility. He had spent his career trying to save lives at sea. He had invented modern weather forecasting from nothing. On April 30, 1865, Robert FitzRoy cut his own throat with a razor. He was 60 years old. His weather service was shut down after his death. The scientific establishment considered it an embarrassment. It was reinstated 4 years later, because sailors kept dying without it. The institution that destroyed him quietly rebuilt everything he created. Under different names, without attribution. The next problem was mathematical. Individual observations existed. Networks existed. But nobody could calculate what the atmosphere would do next. The equations governing fluid dynamics were known. Solving them fast enough to be useful was considered computationally impossible. It would take a world war to change that. Louis Fry Richardson was a Quaker pacifist serving as an ambulance driver in World War I. Between evacuating the wounded, he sat in barns and attempted to calculate tomorrow's weather mathematically. His method was correct. His 6-week calculation produced a forecast for 6 hours earlier. He published it anyway. Richardson calculated that accurate global weather prediction would require 64,000 human mathematicians working simultaneously. He described them arranged in a vast circular hall, each person responsible for one region of atmosphere. One conductor coordinating them all. He called it a forecast factory. It was science fiction. It was also precisely correct. In 1950, John von Neumann used one of the world's first electronic computers to produce the first numerical weather forecast. The calculation took 24 hours. It predicted weather 6 hours into the future. Richardson's factory of 64,000 humans had been replaced by a single machine in a room. The forecast was usable. Barely. The real transformation came from above. Tyros 1, launched in 1960, was the first weather satellite. It sent back grainy black and white images of cloud formations from space. Meteorologists wept. For the first time in human history, the atmosphere could be seen whole, not measured from below, observed from outside. From Babylonian clay tablets to orbital satellites took 2,600 years. Every step was driven not by curiosity alone but by catastrophe. Ships sinking. Armies destroyed. Harvests failing. Humans did not study weather because it was interesting. They studied it because ignoring it kept killing them. The pioneers of meteorology were not cautious academics in comfortable offices. They were sailors, soldiers, and ambulance drivers doing mathematics between disasters. They published findings that were mocked, built systems that were dismantled, died before their contributions were acknowledged. The science survived them. The institutions that persecuted them did not always. Today's meteorologists work inside supercomputer networks processing 10 million weather observations every single day. Their forecast accuracy at 72 hours is now approximately 86%. FitzRoy's accuracy with 13 stations and a telegraph was considered scandalous. The difference is not intelligence. It is infrastructure. The European Center for Medium-Range Weather Forecasts runs calculations on one of the most powerful computers on Earth. It processes the equivalent of 40 trillion mathematical operations per second. Richardson's ambulance barn arithmetic now runs automatically, every 6 hours. Without pause. FitzRoy never received a government pension. His family was left in debt after his death. The meteorological office he founded still operates today from its headquarters in Exeter. It is called the Met Office. His name does not appear on the building. It appears in the acknowledgments section of a pamphlet available in the reception area. The barometer Torricelli invented in 1643 still works on the same principle today. Atmospheric pressure still rises before clear weather. Still falls before storms. 380 years of accumulated scientific apparatus and the fundamental instrument has not changed. We just stopped hanging it in drawing rooms as decoration. Humans have always needed to know what the sky would do tomorrow. The methods changed. The desperation did not. We moved from entrails to onion skins to barometers to satellites to quantum computing. Each generation considered its method definitive. Each generation was partially wrong. Ours included. Modern meteorology still cannot predict tornadoes more than about 13 minutes in advance. Hurricane track forecasts carry error margins of hundreds of kilometers 5 days out. The atmosphere is not uncooperative. It is genuinely chaotic. Edward Lorenz proved mathematically in 1963 that long-range weather prediction has a fundamental ceiling. We have been approaching that ceiling ever since. Lorenz discovered chaos theory accidentally. He reran a weather simulation with slightly rounded input numbers. The output diverged completely from the original. He realized small atmospheric differences compound exponentially over time. A butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could theoretically influence a tornado in Texas. This was not poetry. It was mathematics. It ended the dream of perfect forecasting permanently. From Babylon to the European Space Agency took 2,600 years. Every instrument, every network, every formula was built on the ruins of a previous failure. The Crimean fleet that sank in 1854 is the reason your phone tells you to bring an umbrella tomorrow. 38 ships, 1,400 dead sailors, one astronomer with a telegraph. That is the founding document of modern meteorology. You check the weather without thinking. A reflex. A 2-second gesture. Behind that gesture is Torricelli measuring air pressure in 1643. FitzRoy dying in disgrace in 1865. Richardson doing calculus in a barn while artillery shells fell around him. Von Neumann running a computer for 24 hours to predict 6 hours of weather. Every meteorologist who was mocked, underfunded, institutionally destroyed, or simply ignored. You check the weather. They paid for that. The atmosphere does not care about our instruments. It does not care about our satellites, our supercomputers, or our chaos equations. It moves according to its own mathematics. We have spent 3,000 years learning to read it. We are still learning. The sky has not changed. We have